What did I learn from doing it? I learned that it's a lot of work, that um, arrangement is really important, I think, and that really trying to, well, to fit the goal of the 60 seconds was really difficult. So it forced me to make choices that I might not have made if I didn't have those constraints. So cutting stuff I liked, and also really sharpening my focus.
I learned some patience and some humility. And it's always good to be on the other side of the teaching kind of dynamic. And being a student reminds me that I've got a lot more to learn, and I enjoy learning.
I think one of the most important lessons is being a student again and experiencing the perspective of a student who's in my composition class or women's and gender studies class or literature class, where I know the material very well, I know how to do the assignments. They do not know what I expect and want, and things that I assume they should know, they do not know. So it gives me new empathy for people who maybe don't have the same level of literacy in terms of literature writing that I have.
The other thing I think this week has taught probably all of us is the incredible power of mentoring.
Collaboration is huge. And one thing that I was talking to somebody else in the class about was we set students up to learn everything individualistically. They have to write all of their papers. They're not supposed to collaborate. They're not supposed to share. We're so afraid of plagiarism and all these different things, or cheating. And yet, as scholars and academics, we collaborate and write papers together all the time. And so maybe we should take some of that and look at that when our students are working together. Maybe there should be more workshops or gatherings where they can bounce ideas off each other. And then they can create that piece of paper, that text that empowers them individually. But there's nothing wrong with having that collaboration to get there, because a lot of times students think better when there's collaboration versus having to do this totally by themselves and being isolated.
Well, of course, I learned the skills. I learned how to use Movie Maker properly. I tried to use it before to put together like travel slideshows and things like that that my family had done. So to learn it properly, to have it properly taught to me was really refreshing, because especially with so much of Apple, I think so much of the Apple software, it's like they just think it's so intuitive and really don't need that kind of step-by-step detail. And it's like, oh, just do this. And even in the YouTube videos, if you go and look at how to use this, if it's not some 13-year-old murmuring way low because they doesn't want to wake his parents up, again, it just never was quite the right fit. I felt like I was being talked down to, or they were talking over my head, and it was really refreshing this time to get exactly the kind of instruction I needed to make it work.
In terms of what I take away from it as a teacher, the most interesting thing to me was I'm very interested in bodies and bodies in the classroom and things like that. I'm not a Mac user. To do the 60 and 60 video, I had to work exclusively on a Mac, and I was really amazed at how inept I was at that. It was terrible. The keyboard was smaller, the mouse moved at a different speed, and I really felt like it was like someone giving me a pencil and telling me to write with my toes. Like, I was just really disoriented by that. And it made me think about, in the classroom we ask students to put away their technology, don't use your phone, and things like that. And it's like, but if that's the way they're used to interacting in the classroom, or if that's the best way for them to take notes or to visualize certain text, and taking that away from them and saying, here you have to write with a pen when you're much faster and are used to using your thumbs on your phone to take notes. It's like, why should I do that? Why should I force them into a situation where their concentration is really on how they're interacting with the machine, as opposed to what it is they're trying to do? Because that was the big lesson for me with the Mac, was that there were so many just keyboard shortcuts and things like that that didn't work. And my focus so much of the time and my frustration was driven by the fact that I knew what I wanted to do and I couldn't get it to work, and my focus was on my body's relationship to the machine instead of that being natural and not having to be thought about, rather than what I was trying to accomplish with the machine. So that was kind of my big lesson in terms of technology in the classroom and my role in that as a teacher.
I think a lot of what I've been learning about is about editing and how the similarities that there are between editing a short story or a paragraph that you're writing in an email or a movie I'm making about, you know, ducks or something silly, like the ways that we can edit something in order to you can make a huge impact in 60 seconds, you can make a huge impact in 10 seconds, and I don't really think that's something you can do with text as easily, you know, with alphabetic text as easily. So I feel incredibly empowered and inspired by the technology.
What did you learn that you think might transfer to alphabetic text?
Well, I think always the shorter something is, the better it is. You know, brevity is the soul of everything, right?
I mean, I think I've really learned a lot just about the capabilities of incorporating those types of elements into a text. Obviously, we get a lot out of the written word, or just a still image on a page, but I've really been thinking a lot about the sort of different affordances of actually hearing someone speak or watching someone speak. I'm considering doing a series of interviews for my dissertation project, and so I'm really starting to think about how I want to represent those.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I'm just making small selections and quoting, or even just printing, you know, sort of sections of a conversation that I'm having, that's one way to represent it, but it could be so much more full and so much more complete and more fair to the people that I'm working with if I'm actually somehow providing the full sort of audio clip or a full video clip, so you don't only hear their voice, but you see their expression and you see sort of the emotion on their face, and really get a full sort of sense of how they are representing the topics that they're speaking about. So I've very much been considering kind of ways to deal with those issues. That's been kind of the most interesting and the most sort of surprising thing that I've learned.
I definitely learned a lot about using different modes, right? You know, I never felt necessarily uncomfortable with them, but I definitely feel more comfortable with the technology. I think I also learned how to use those modes rhetorically and use those modes to emphasize and reiterate a lot of things that are already taught in the forms of essays and alphabetic texts, right? Because in one way, that's the way I've been explaining it to myself as we've been going along, right? I was one of those people who always, you know, said the English word after the foreign language word, and that's kind of what I've been doing. And I'm excited about, you know, letting that inform my teaching.
My mind has been open to ways I can use digital media both in my scholarship and also in my teaching. So, you know, of course, the challenge is I'm constantly thinking about access. I'm always working in places where I can't assume a student has even, you know, a cell phone that will take video or audio or whatever it is. So I'm still kind of trying to figure out those aspects, but I'm definitely feeling like there's more possibility now to bring in, especially multimodal composing, even if that means not just thinking in terms of technology, but giving students options.
When you say you think that more possibility, you mean in terms of what you feel able to coach in the classroom, or in terms of kind of writing itself broadening for you?
I guess I mean the different ways that students can compose, and certainly what I'm able to teach. But that's a challenge to kind of figuring out, well, how do I make room for, you know, teaching the basics of iMovie or something when there's such limited time. But I think that that's a problem that is workable. I just feel like I have to kind of figure out how to manage it.
Yeah, I've learned so much from being at DMAC in terms of, you know, one thing, just being able to work with some of the technology in a way that I think I was just too scared to even start before. And so knowing some of that stuff, but also just gaining the confidence to know that it's okay that I don't know that stuff and that I have the ability to learn it. I am rethinking every assignment that I have. I am rethinking how I create those assignments, how I deliver those assignments, how I assess those assignments. So it's given me a lot to think about, and it's made me really excited about some of those big changes I can make that I think are going to be really helpful to my students.
I learned a lot from this experience, and I have just finished teaching a graduate course on digital literacy, and so my students created similar projects, and I kind of wish I had done this before I had taught the course in a lot of ways, even though I was very familiar with a lot of the aspects of it. Just some of the things that I've learned about ways you can enhance even what you're doing through video captioning or through thinking about issues of access, as well as how a peer review might be conducted. One of the things I've been reflecting on this week is how we all watched our videos at Scott's house, and afterwards, and he did it in a way that there was no peer review, right? It was just we watched him, it was a celebration. And I've done that too, kind of like a show and tell, but we always go through these peer review processes, and in this instance, we didn't have a peer review. And after we watched all of our videos as a whole, but also mine individually, I felt it was such an emotional experience, the whole process of watching everybody's and then mine as well, that I don't know how I would have felt being peer reviewed at that moment. And so I started thinking about ways that I could restructure my peer review so that students might have the opportunity to experience things differently, because we don't always take into consideration, or I don't, the way that they feel in that moment, especially when showing a project or hearing a project. I think it's a little bit different than print, even though it can be quite an emotional experience then too. So thinking more about peer review and how I might revise my practices in the digital context.
By doing this project, I reinforced really that idea of kind of getting done what you can in the time that you have to do it, which I think is kind of a pragmatic professional thing to learn. All right, what is it that I can conceivably, what is the best I can make this given the time I have, the knowledge I've gathered, how can I make the best use of the means available to me and the time available to me. So kind of pragmatically and professionally speaking, that's one thing that this process taught me. I think it also just taught me how important it is to play around with things and to have structured time to do that, because on my own I've been kind of wanting to tinker with iMovie for a while. I just never kind of got around to it, and I tell myself, oh, I'm just going to make a digital installation for a conference I'm going to go to and make my presentation more interesting. I never actually did it, because in the end it was like 2 projects and they were both competing for my attention, and I said, well, I feel like it's more important to deliver the presentation orally than to have a shorter presentation than a video at the tail end, and so it always got pushed to the side.
I've learned really specific technology that I wanted to learn, like different programs that I have just wanted the opportunity and the time and space to do so. I've learned a lot of general things and specific things from people from different institutions and kind of about scholarship and about the field. And then I think it's just kind of put me in like a really good place for like picking things up and playing with them. It's since it's such a doing based kind of institute, I think that's what has been especially valuable for me, has been that we will, we'll sit and we'll talk about things and we'll investigate them that way, and then there's like the lab hours and the time that you spend toying around with things, and that's like a kind of learning and learning about learning that when I've been like buried under books this year, it hasn't maybe gotten as much attention, and it's very exciting, and it kind of invigorates like things that we want to be talking about with like action.